Welcome back, Endgame. It's Chris, and let's talk about some sneaky starts you can use in Week 10. And let's start as we always do with running backs, and how about Mark Ingram of the Saints? Since coming back, this has kind of been what we used to see, that 1-2 punch with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara there. He only had 3 less touches than Alvin Kamara in Week 9. He also caught a bunch of passes, and mysteriously, Kamara is dealing with some kind of injury. Now we're hearing it might be an ankle injury. The Saints did go try out some running backs, and they did sign one to the practice squad, which doesn't mean Kamara isn't going to play, but definitely means there is some concern there. So if Kamara's out, obviously Mark Ingram now becomes, a top 15 running back in Week 10. But even if Kamara does play, I still like Mark Ingram as a sneaky start in an offense that wants to run the ball and use these running backs. He's got tons of value, he's catching passes, and he can always score a touchdown. All right, next up is a PPR type running back, and that is Nyheim Hines. Now, I know he's coming off a big game in Week 9, but most people are going to say, it was the Jets, and it's just one of those random Nyheim Hines games. But he's averaged over 12 PPR fantasy points in games that Marlon Mack has not played this year, and ever since the trade deadline, Marlon Mack hasn't been activated, right? The Colts were trying to showcase him for a trade. That just didn't happen. So it's just really the Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines show. And he's going to get some work on the ground, and of course he's going to get work through the air. And this is a guy who can always take one play and turn it into a huge play to save his day. So he has a very nice floor in PPR leagues with some upside. And then finally, how about Javonte Williams kind of being forgotten here as the season goes on because, well, let's face it, Melvin Gordon's been good, right? He's the lead back there, and Javonte Williams basically just getting in, garbage time and splitting work with Melvin Gordon. But this is a great week where I think he can have flex value going against an Eagles defense that is very bad against the run, has allowed 10 rushing touchdowns, and they're also very susceptible to the underneath short throws, which means Javonte Williams will have a chance to catch 3, 4, even 5 passes in this game. So I think Javonte Williams in this matchup has sneaky flex value this week. Obviously, Melvin Gordon is the guy, but if you need him, Javonte Williams can help you. All right, let's move on to wide receivers. Donovan Peoples-Jones. The good news was he was second on the team in targets in the first game without Odell. The bad news is he only had 3 targets because this team does not throw the ball. Now, Nick Chubb did land on the COVID list. He could miss Week 10. Maybe they will throw more. We don't know. I mean, the last time Nick Chubb didn't play, Dearness Johnson handled 30 carries. So they might just stick with that in this matchup. But we know Peoples-Jones, he's the number 2 guy for whatever that is worth. And we know he's always capable of hitting a big play at any time. So even like last week where he only caught 2 passes, he got 86 yards and a touchdown. So if you're desperate at wide receiver and you need that home run upside potential, look at Peoples-Jones. Moving on to quite possibly one of the biggest surprises at wide receiver this year, and that is Jamal Agnew. He has 7, 5, 6, and 5 targets over the last 4, which is second on the team only to Marvin Jones. That's right, special teamer Jamal Agnew appears to be the Jaguars' number 2 wide receiver for whatever that is worth. And going up against Indy, they're not very good against the pass. So this is a great matchup for him this week against Indy. He's still on a ton of waiver wires. Still, people aren't really believing in him or buying into him. So if you're desperate at the wide receiver position, or if you need a flex this week, especially in a PPR format, go see if he's still on your waivers. Throw him in your lineup. I think he's going to have a nice week here in Week 10. And the final sneaky wide receiver start, Michael Gallup. Remember him? Been on IR for what seems like forever, really almost the entire season. But all the reports are he's going to be activated from IR this week. We know the upside he has in this offense. We know the upside this offense has. Ignore what happened in Week 9. That was one of those crazy outlier weeks. This is still one of the best offenses in the NFL, one of the best passing offenses in the NFL. Michael Gallup has a role. We know he can always hit a home run, always break off a big play. And again, this is a guy nobody's really thinking about because he hasn't played, I think, since Week 1, maybe Week 2, whatever it was. So definitely a sneaky start here in Week 10. Has lots of upside going up against Atlanta. That secondary can definitely be exploited. This should be a high-scoring game. So if you've been holding on to Michael Gallup and you need him this week, I think he's a great start. Finally, let's finish with one QB and one tight end. And for the QB, I'm going to say Taylor Heinicke. He's actually been pretty good for fantasy this year, despite how kind of bad he's been in real life. And it's because the football team is just throwing it a lot. He's got 30 or more pass attempts in each of his last 5 games. He's thrown the ball over 40 times twice this season. And in a game against Tampa Bay, you got to think they're going to be playing from behind. They're going to have to be throwing the ball more. And he also gives you a really nice, safe, high floor because of what he can do with his legs and with his rushing. I mean, we've seen in one game he had 10 rush attempts. So he gives you a nice, safe floor with the legs and plenty of ceiling because of all his pass attempts and because of the fact that this team probably going to be playing from behind, going to have to abandon the run. They haven't really been able to run the ball anyways, and he's going to have to throw probably 35 to 40 times in this one. So if you're struggling at QB, if you need a QB, look at Taylor Heinicke. I think he gets it done in Week 10. And then my tight end start is Dan Arnold. Now, he's getting less and less sneaky by the week, but this is a guy who has 7 or more targets in 3 of the last 4 games and 17 targets over the last 2. Now, the good news is he hasn't had a boom game like Pat Freiermuth did last week after I recommended him as a sneaky tight end start. Maybe this will be the week because the targets are there and the matchup is there. Going up against Indy, 5th worst against tight ends on the season. Again, this isn't the Bills where the Jaguars aren't going to be able to move the ball. They'll be able to move the ball. James Robinson sounds like he's going to play. That will help the offense. So Dan Arnold is in a great spot here. He kind of is the Jags' number 2 target behind Marvin Jones. I know I talked about Jamal Agnew, but as far as the entire roster goes, Dan Arnold's been the number 2 behind Marvin Jones. So this is a great spot for him in a great matchup. Like I recommended last week with Freiermuth, I think if you're desperate at tight end or if you're streaming tight end, he's the one to play this week in Week 10. He'll get it done for you. All right, guys, those are my sneaky starts for Week 10. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.